Mic check.
So that the section on the kennel licensing is a different ordinance altogether. I guess I didn't tie it back in, but that's a good point. So the hobby kennel definition. Page, what page is it? 13. Yes, that makes sense, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't even look at it.
I just want to let you know that you are live, and not that you have to start yet, because you got 2 minutes.
Yeah, either more than 3 or 4 more. Yeah. I'm sure we're going to find little stuff like that all over.
I think I wore a winter jacket the last time we had a meeting.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how you go from too cold to open the windows one day to air conditioning the next. Go in between.
And you got my few comments too.
I did. Yeah, I did all those comments. It's one thing we have to talk about a little bit is the signage with respect to yeah, exactly. And so
Exactly.
I worked it into the ordinance and we didn't even talk about it.
All right. All right. Well, we'll see how far we can get. We got 3 minutes.
So hopefully we're done. We wrap it up.
Well, it's not that we can't.
Well, comments can still come in during the public hearing.
Sure.
We can still change it from this point forward.
Yeah, there's a few things on the matrix I studied. And it's like, I don't know if the discussion's going to be very long, but that could be changed after the public hearing too.
Yeah, because you never know what's going to come up at the public hearing.
Right.
Or after we're done tonight, if you have other comments, send them away. And as long as it's not substantial enough, it has to be debated with the planning commission again. If it's minor corrections, as long as they get.
Yeah.
But again, when we looked at doing the ordinance, I didn't go through from start to finish and think about ways to revise the entire ordinance. We targeted like 8 things we were going to address, and then through the process, we found that people raised good points about other sections of the ordinance, and we updated those too. But that wasn't really the scope to go through the entire document.
Jim, what is your microphone number? I just want to.
3. Yeah, 3.
And Mario, what are you?
6.
You're 6. And Sean is.
That's so you know who to mute.
Yeah.
I'm still missing a filter.
I know, I have to order some. You must have super glued. I feel bad.
It's okay.
You get a,
It's really popping.
This one falls off all the time too.
oh yeah, you have a big tear on yours. I got sent from Mr. Border, President Border, El Presidente.
Oh, yeah.
Lucky 7.
Microsoft has 659. What does the Apple have? 7. All right. We'll get her going. Mr. Newman is here. Good evening. Welcome to the Village of Vernon Plan Commission meeting. Today is Wednesday, May 11th, 2022 at 7 p.m. I will call the Plan Commission to order with the Pledge of Allegiance and a standing moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Roll call and open meeting law compliance check.
President Carol Fortner.
Present.
Trustee Commissioner Jim Solani.
Present.
Commissioner Mario Rinaldi.
Present.
Mr. President, note for the record, you do have a quorum of your Plan Commission. Also note for the record that Sean Malarkey, the Village of Vernon Zoning and Planning Administrator, is here. And Mr. President and board members, the agenda was posted inside and outside the Village Hall, the Village website. To other entities within the village and outside the village, you're in full compliance with the open meetings law.
Thank you. First up is discussion and possible recommendation to the village board on the final certified survey map for Dylan Newman and his parents for the property located at W243S8140 Evergreen Drive, tax number 2073995. Mr. Dillon, please come up. We all know you, but please state your name and address for the record, and then we'll have Sean kick it off and go from there.
Yes, it's on.
My name is Dylan Newman. I'm at West 243 South 8140 Evergreen Drive. Oh, there we go.
There it is,
Now
yeah.
it's on. Now I'm really close. Do I have to repeat what I just said?
No, that's good.
All right.
So Sean, why don't you kick us off, and then Dylan, if you could, just make sure Sean accurately describes everything. Sean?
Yeah, so this is very simple. Mr. Newman was in front of us back in January. He received approval for a accessory building, 4,000 square foot accessory building to replace the large accessory building that's in the easternmost accessory building on the property at the time. However, as a condition of approval, he was required to combine his two lots. There's actually two lots here under one tax key. There's a smaller lot that the home is on that is about 0.55 acres, and then the remainder is about a 4-acre lot. It looks like it's all one parcel, but it's really not. And so our code requires that you have to have a residence as the principal structure in a residential district before you can build a accessory building. So he wasn't legally allowed to build the new accessory building without a residence unless these parcels were combined together. So that's what he's doing. He's brought forward a CSM to combine the parcels. The zoning district is A2 a rural home, which requires 3 acres minimum lot size, 200 feet of frontage. No problem there. The combined parcel is 4.55 acres approximately. Our surveyor has a few comments for you in terms of just technical things. One of them was about the right-of-way and just other very minor things. So if the Plan Commission recommends approval and the board would approve this, I think, is it next week the board meets? On the 11th, the board approves it. I'm sorry, 19th then. Your surveyor would just have to clean up these comments, send it back to me just to make sure that they've been addressed, and then you can record it and build your accessory building. So that's all I have. The conditions are very simple. One is just, basically satisfying all concerns and reimbursement of expenses.
Sean, the first paragraph under your overview, so it's combine a 0.55 acre parcel with a 4.00 acre parcel to result in not a 4.32, but a 4.55?
4.32 because the right-of-way is going to be dedicated.
Ah, okay.
There's about 9,000 square feet of right-of-way or whatever it is that'll be dedicated. So
Oh, I see, after
dedication of right-of-way,
Okay.
right,
Gotcha. So that's where that number comes from.
correct.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Newman, did Sean accurately describe your project?
Sounds about right.
Questions by Plan Commissioner? Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward, yeah.
Sean, did you see Mr. Newman had to have all these, the surveyor comments corrected before he could bring it to the village board?
No. We'll just pass those comments on to the village board. Just, your surveyor can begin correcting them right away, but they wouldn't be required for the board meeting. It's just before the village will sign it and you can record it, they have to be corrected.
All right. And before we do anything, it needs to go to the board then.
Before you build your accessory building, it still has to go to final board, because the plan commission only makes a recommendation, the board is the approving
Gotcha.
body.
Okay, so it would go to the board with the recommendation if the Plan Commission so decides to approve the combination of the CSM,
Yeah, recommends approval, right?
subject to these conditions,
Mhm.
and one of which is what you just described, the surveyor comments.
Correct.
So we get, even if the board approves next week, they still have to be satisfied before it can get recorded.
Right, I'll take a look at it as soon as they're done, and then I'll let, obviously you guys know, it can be signed and recorded, and then you're off.
Right, so it will really be, you can get started on them right away, so, for your surveyor.
Out of curiosity, did you ever, as part of the approval for the accessory building in January, there was a condition that said if you tore down something ahead of time. You had to post a bond or letter of credit. Did you guys do anything, or did you just sit tight?
So Vince said wait to do anything. We got some quotes and I gave them to Vince. But he said wait until we handle all of this before we get into any of that.
Make it simple. Okay.
Right, because he has to do this before he actually starts with the demo and
Correct.
construction.
Right.
It'd be, you pay for a bond that would be equal to the demolition of the existing building. You keep it up, and then my understanding is you have, whatever, 30 days or whatever.
Yeah, right. So we allowed you to keep all your stuff in there, basically, while the
Right.
new one was being constructed. And then the bond guarantees it'll come down after the new one's completed. So that's been approved. Just you'd have to take care of that once this approval happens. Unless you decide to move everything out of there ahead of time somehow,
Yeah,
and you can forego the bond altogether and just tear it down.
right, yeah. I don't know. We'll probably go the bound route just because it's easier. And you just move things, the 50 feet instead of bring them to a storage unit or something and then
Sure.
back. But
That's up to you. Yeah.
Right, I think that's right. That's the way the approval was. It was really your choice.
Mm-hmm.
All that the plan commission carried.
yeah, my intention is to go the bound route as of now.
Okay. Okay, so we're looking for a motion for the Village of Vernon Plan Commission to recommend to the Village Board approval of the certified survey map request for Dylan Newman for the property located at W243S 8140 Evergreen Drive, subject to the conditions as set forth in the, fourth report dated May 4, 2022?
I'll second that motion.
I'll make it.
You make it, that I'll second.
Instead of just looking for it, I'll just make it.
It sounded like you were making it.
Is there any, no further discussion on my part? Any further discussion from Plan Commission? Sean, anything? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Sounds good.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
Zoning code.
So I made changes, and as always, they're highlighted in gray, the new changes since the last meeting. I think in summary, when we left the last meeting, there was I think the main points were this, is that you wanted me to recommend through the code where I thought the plan commission could handle things and where the board needed approval. So I did that. Also, we tuned up a couple things with home occupation. There was some questions about the barbers and salons, and tuned those up in the basement. Egress, those got tuned up. We had the situation where, remember, I can't remember his name now. The gentleman approached us about building a second residence when the first one existed.
Right.
He wanted to tear the residence down, actually tear it. We allow that provision in the code now, but he wanted to tear the residence down, leave up an existing accessory building, and then build his building. And so I've added basically a very similar process for that, which requires, posting letter of credit, et cetera, to tear down the accessory building if the house never gets built, that kind of thing. I made a number of minor edits. Carl, you sent me after the meeting, you sent me some minor edits, and then also pointed out to me that, hey, we don't allow off-premise signs except in a couple situations according to the code. However, we have off-premise signs at the
Next door.
the sponsorship signs, which are in fact off-premise signs. So I went through the code, the sign section, and once I started thinking about that, that triggered a couple other things. So I did make some edits there. I think we have to talk through. Mario, you just mentioned before the meeting started to clean up the definition of professional offices, to be just engineer instead of professional engineer, and then the definition of how hobby kennel. So I think, let's summarize the Plan Commission and Board responsibilities and the way I saw it, and you can tell me if if I'm way off base. Essentially, the Plan Commission is going to take care of everything in the zoning ordinance, except for, they'll still make recommendations for site plans and plans of operation. That still gets recommended to the board. Now, you can tell me if you think I'm wrong. Conditional uses are still board issue. And then environmental corridor overlay districts where there's a disturbance so normally what we require from the code is that if you are in an environmental corridor, you have to build your house outside of the corridor if there's room. If there's not room and you have to disturb the corridor, there's got to be a disturbance envelope, et cetera, identified. And then there's got to be a deed restriction associated with that, or it's got to be marked as a note on the CSM or the plat or whatever it is. And so I left the board there as well. You can tell me if you think it's not necessary, and the only reason I did that is because it kind of gets into, it's a lot of times it ties into CSMs and approval of CSMs, ties into, a restriction on the property actually being recorded. I don't feel super strongly about that one, but since I took everything else away from the board, including, so let me run down what the Plan Commission approves by themselves. If there's a determination for a rural accessory building, and they have special protections for accessory buildings, they have, basically you can do more if it's determined to be a rural accessory building. And it used to be that the Plan Commission would make a recommendation, but the board would determine. So now that's just a Plan Commission thing. Extensions for zoning use permits. So once a permit's granted, let's say we grant something, a site plan of operation, or I grant a permit for a new home, and it happens to be 2 years past or something like that, they can come back in and just ask for an extension. In this case, the Plan Commission now would be able to grant that themselves. Determination of similar uses is so if something's not classified in the code as a permitted use, for instance, not an other use, but let's say, someone comes in with a bakery and we didn't have listed a bakery in the code, and you'd say, oh yes, it's it's similar to this type of operation or that type of operation, it's okay. As a permitted use, used to be the board had to make that determination, and now move that to the Plan Commission. There's a provision in here about selling substandard lots. That substandard lots, especially adjacent to other ones, if they're under the same ownership of a property owner, has to be approved by the board. That's what it previously said, and now it's moved to the Plan Commission. Parking flexibilities, I moved to the Plan Commission. All signage gets approved by the Plan Commission. To me, that one always seemed like a no-brainer. That that's just such a minor thing. That why would the board necessarily have approvals of signs? Anyhow, accessory buildings in their entirety, they were already approved by the Plan Commission, but there was a section in there that talked about waivers for quantity was a board approval, and so I moved that to the Plan Commission. Undesirable structures, meaning if there's a question, if the building inspector has a question about junk or a dilapidated building, they can bring it to the Plan Commission for a determination of whether or not it's undesirable and needs to be brought into compliance. Before that was a board issue. And then legal nonconforming structures, there's a couple provisions in there about modifications to them, allowing modifications to legal nonconforming structures, and so that's solely a Plan Commission thing. So again, board is site plans after Plan Commission recommendation, conditional uses after Plan Commission recommendation, and then environmental corridor overlay disturbance, which the more I'm talking about that, the more I'm thinking that maybe that isn't a board issue.
Is a board issue?
Isn't.
Oh, isn't.
So let's talk about those things before we move on to some of the other edits. Do you feel strongly on, what about site plans of operations? And obviously the board is going to have the final say on this, right? We're just the plan.
Reviewing what we're.
Yes, if they actually read what we're writing, they're going to have the final say.
Right, this is only a recommendation.
This is a recommendation, right?
Right, and so the recommendation is to reduce the issues the board needs to actually decide
Yeah.
and leave them at the Plan Commission, because in each of those instances I think you read, it was always going to the board in the form of a recommendation.
That's right. Every single one of those things was a recommendation to the board, signage, parking, you know. So,
Is the history that in those situations, it was predominantly so that the village approved the recommendation?
I only have about 5 years' experience with the village. I don't think there are many instances where the board goes in a different direction than the plan commission. Tell me if I'm wrong.
I think the view previously always was if there was something contentious that was decided on, and a plan commission is appointed by a board where board members are elected by, so that was always the issue that was discussed when we were under county zoning, is if there was accountability as it relates to a bad decision, at least they could unelect board members. You
Right.
can't unelect, and that was the philosophy.
And that's the reason I've kept the big things, site plans, plans of operations, conditional uses, as board, you know, the buck stops with them on those bigger issues.
Just a quick question on, I agree with everything. It's just that the methodology that you use to switch it from board approval to planning commission approval is you just eliminated the word board and put planning in there. So now it doesn't say board. That, in my mind, does not preclude the board from overriding necessarily. One other way to look at it is, so it's something that we say that is a planning commission area of responsibility, but the planning commission gets together and wants to make the motion to recommend it to the board.
Yeah.
They can still do that.
They
right?
can do that, but the only thing they can really do, I think, and maybe this is a question for our attorney, is you can move it on for them to evaluate and concur. They can't. I don't think you can give the board the power to override the decision, because the zoning ordinance is the law, and it says the plan commission makes the decision. If you want the board's opinion on it, you could send it on for them to review it and give an opinion and concur or not. And then they could recommend that the plan commission maybe reconsider things if it ends up in a different way. But I don't think you can delegate to the board the authority that the plan commission has by the power of the zoning ordinance.
Otherwise, it's essentially a recommendation.
Right, which I can see a possibility of something weird in some of these things coming up that maybe affects.
Here's what I would recommend in those situations: that the plan commission don't even make a motion at that point. Say, we'd like the board to weigh in on this, have the board make an opinion, and then bring it back to the plan commission for a decision based on after receiving the board's opinion on it.
I very much like that perspective. How do you capture that?
You don't. I don't think you do. And every plan commission is going to be different in terms of what they think they need opinion or not. But everybody does it differently. Every community is different in terms of all of these things. And some ordinances don't even have all these different, checkpoints in them. But, some communities, none of this stuff goes to the board, right? It's all handled
Right.
by the plan commission, because the plan commission was set up to make the planning decisions. The board handles bigger picture things, finances and all, and other things. Now, in smaller communities like Vernon, a lot of times the plan commission and board review all the same things to get some redundancy there and some accountability there. And the board likes to know what's going on, in almost every aspect of the community. And so that you have all that redundancy. But in bigger communities, you don't see the board making a lot of zoning decisions.
Right.
It's a plan commission thing.
I'm in agreement with your split. It is the big picture stuff that you've left to the board and individual applications to the plan commission. They get a chance to look at.
And we'll certainly point this out to the board,
Oh,
and say, hey, this is what we
Absolutely.
did. What do you think?
The board has final say-so of any changes to any ordinance.
Right,
So,
right.
this will have to be pointed out to them.
Yeah, they can
It is.
strike, they can say, yeah, this, no, this, yeah, this, and.
Yeah, put it
and-
back, we want to approve this. I think, the idea where the plan commission, I'm gonna use a bad term maybe, gets stuck or would like the input of the elected officials, the board, before making a decision. So long as somehow that works, I think that might be helpful to have. And it wouldn't matter what decision, I guess, at that point.
Right.
But it would be up to the plan commission to say, might be contentious. Although it's conditional use permits that are typically the contentious ones. And that is on the list for the board.
Or new businesses that come in and then it's a whole new site, that's,
New site
that's.
or all new site plan of operation.
Right.
They want to start at 4 a.m, whatever. I think that's, appropriate for the board. Your list, though, I only scribbled down one on your list as you were taking. That is the, I just said permitted, but it means it's the permissive or other uses that are,
We used to have,
decorating and making cakes. Well, it's the same, so somebody ought to, that's an easy one. Maybe the
Right.
plan commission could do it, but, on the matrix, at the bottom, other uses, it's Ps across the board. So,
that's other uses, but you have to find that they are, you first have to find that they're similar to a use.
right. So when you said that, because the matrix says now, similar uses subject to the approval of the village board.
Oh, so that hasn't been,
Recommendation
that hasn't been updated yet, so,
of the village plan commission. When I studied this, again, I thought, well, there's a lot of Ps across the board. Maybe that's okay if the board decides, but what you're saying is, well, maybe the plan commission could decide. So that's why.
Right.
When you were ticking them off, that's the one I flagged as in, well, maybe that should stay with the board. But the simple one, it's like, well, but it's the more difficult one is be the,
do you think
That's
though?
kind of why I asked whether the planning commission could go back to the board and get their input,
right, as an,
you know,
as a good example of,
right?
because really we're trying to interpret the ordinance at that point. Does it include, does
Right.
the bakery include cake decorating?
Right, exactly. That's exactly the point. Now, if you remember, we used to have in our conditional uses this other category in conditional uses, and that's how we got the event barn. Remember, where the plan commission had to basically create a new conditional use on the fly and establish a series of conditions. And so we've eliminated that. So there is no other conditional uses. This is only other permitted uses. So you can never determine to be a similar,
That when you couldn't.
we can't invent new conditional uses without amending the code to do it.
Right, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That should be solved.
That's right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
How do you address current unspecified CUs?
There's a provision in our code that allows, that we added last time we messed with the conditional uses, that honors all existing conditional uses, and they can even be modified under the terms that were in place at the time. So let's talk about that environmental corridor overlay district.
So,
Do you understand what it is? When we're disturbing the corridor and we're carving pieces of the corridor out, we're trying to protect the corridor. That's what our plan says. That's what our ordinance says. But when you're allowing them to cut into it, there's got to be an envelope that's established and demarcated on a CSM or a plat or a deed restriction that says you can't disturb anywhere beyond that. And so it's currently a board determination. I've kept it there, but after I sort of talked about it out loud, I'm thinking, well, maybe that's not that big of a
yeah,
deal.
to me, that's a little bit tougher one, or it's on the line. I'm not sure which way that falls, because if it's delineated on a CSM or otherwise deed restricted, the board,
The board's going to see every CSM and plat anyways,
anyways.
so they're going to be part of that. But it's going to be if someone has an existing lot that hasn't been built on yet,
where there is no need for a CSM.
no need for a CSM, they want to put a new house or an accessory building or whatever it is.
Wouldn't we deed restrict them to an envelope then?
Yes, in that case, we would do a deed restriction, a map that gets recorded on their property that puts the limit, but the question is who approves that? So to be cautious, I left it with the board, but because I think it is kind of a, could go either way.
The only thing is the plan commission usually has a lot more expertise as it relates to the delineation of an environmental corridor. Not saying that a board member can't make that decision,
Mm-hmm.
but you deal with it a lot more at a plan commission level.
Right, but it could be up on a recommendation and then for approval. Yeah, to me, it's a tougher call as opposed to some of the other ones you listed off, Sean, that's all.
Yeah.
Mario,
It's just. I kind of agree with what Karen was just said. I think it's probably more a plan commission area of expertise. But,
so is everything we do.
pardon me?
So is everything.
Exactly.
Site plan, operation.
That's why I brought this up originally. But the site plan, I don't have a plan of operation. That is more of a board issue, deciding what they want the village to become. That's kind of strategy. So to me, that's clearly board. But demarcation of something like this, I don't see that being to me, that's more a technical issue. But that's just my cut of it,
Yeah.
We didn't have to change any of those.
Any of those, right.
I was thinking, especially with, how do I say this? Not everybody on the board, as an example, has any or much experience or knowledge to make those kinds of technical decisions. So that's why, to me, I think that's what those are the kinds of people we're gonna be looking for specifically on the planning commission.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I would think that would be maybe a more appropriate place for those decisions to be made. And again, if there was an issue, they can always come back to the board and say, hey, what do you guys think? This is where our direction that we're thinking on going, and, do you have any qualms about it?
Well, and there's always going to be an issue of, are we cutting in 10 feet or 1,000?
Right. Here's the
10
big.
feet, I would say, yeah.
The big issue with environmental corridors is understanding, because normally what you're preserving in corridors is either wetlands, which you're not going to be disturbing anyways, or native trees or steep slopes. And so with the native trees, it's almost always that. And so we're going to need to see some kind of someone's going to have to go out and tell us where those trees are and what you're protecting and what you're cutting down. And so, that's sort of a planning nitty-gritty kind of a thing.
Right.
Mario, got a view one way or the other?
Not particularly. I'm good with the original, line of demarcation, like big picture stuff versus the detailed stuff. Let the board chew on that.
Something that might be more political related than from planning.
So demarcation of environmental corridor is a detail, plan commission, or?
Well, no, they're setting the big picture on the environmental corridors, but then in the application on a given property is what we're talking about now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think we deal with all the time.
Okay. I just want to make sure I follow.
So it sounds like move that,
Yeah.
it sounds like for now, move it to the plan commission
Right.
and
Point it
then
out to
let
the
the board decide.
We're going to have to point everything out to them.
Yeah. Right.
They need to know what they're
They're
voting.
getting into here, yeah.
Right. And we'll have a public hearing as well.
We will, and I guess I question for the public hearing how, we made a lot of changes now to this
I know we got a little bit more than.
over 5 months, and so I could spend an hour plus just going through the changes at this point. So we'll have to kind of decide how we want to do that. I mean, I guess what I'd like to do and what I normally do is provide an overview. I'll have 15 bullet points that I'll go into when I present it to the board and for the public and say, here's the things we want to accomplish. Here's how we accomplish them. But I'm not going to read every change we made. For this particular one, the big bullet item would be moving responsibilities from the board to the plan commission. And I would just highlight, just like I did tonight, what those were.
Right.
And I think President Fortner said to the board, please watch these meetings. And the nice thing is I can always reflect on the notice that you can review in detail the discussion that the Plan Commission had at this meeting, that meeting. You know.
I mean, I'll answer any questions anybody has, obviously, public or board or otherwise. But for signage, for instance, I'm not going to go through every single change we made.
I don't know how you can.
Hit the high, what we try to
The high
accomplish.
points and
Yeah.
then you have to read it. I mean, they could read it.
Yeah, right. Right. I'm going to read
Right.
each one on page 55.
Right. When it's significantly changed, they just need to read it fresh.
Right.
And that goes for the public too. I mean, there might be members of the public that have a particular viewpoint on signage.
There may be.
Maybe might want to come in for signage.
You never know.
That's why we have public hearings, to get further input.
Right. Okay, so I think, should we put that one to bed? We'll move that environmental corridor to PC and otherwise leave it as I have it.
Right.
And
And
see
the
what the
other
board
one that's
says.
permitted, what are we doing there? Changing it or putting it all to the plan commission? or
Well,
keeping
you
it
tell
as-
me. I mean, you seem to think that that was a borderline issue.
Yeah, that's a borderline issue to me.
9 times out of 10, these are going to be pretty simple. Like, it's going to be like, just like you said, is cake decorating business the same as a bakery? Maybe not that simple, but I'll usually have an opinion. So if someone comes forward for a site plan of operation, I will write in my report, hey, to me this is clear, and here's some examples of why I think this is a similar use. And the plan commission is either going to nod, yeah, that, of course, or say, I don't know on that one, and make a determination. So, but normally it's not going to get past me if I think there's a problem, right? If someone comes in and wants to build a prison and they're going to say, well, it's the same thing as a bakery, I'll say, no, that's not true. So it's going to get caught. It's never going to come forward if it's, if it's gray, I'm going to say, okay, we need the plan commission to make a determination. Something happened in the village of village of Waukesha not too long ago where they allowed salons and barber shops and that kind of thing. And a tattoo parlor wanted to come in. And we didn't have tattoo parlors specifically listed in the code, and you can't list everything all the time. And some communities single out tattoo parlors as something, and I've even seen them as conditional uses in some codes, or in certain districts they're allowed, in certain districts they're not. But what I put forward is that I think a tattoo parlor is no different than a beauty shop or a barber shop. It is the same thing to me in terms of that use. It's you make an appointment, come in, get your procedure done, takes a little bit of time, same kind of traffic flow and turnover. I said, this is the same use to me. And the plan commission agreed, and we moved along. In Waukesha, the plan commission makes those determinations.
Wasn't Callan's business similar to that? Because we were working on the conditional use code at the time, and he came in with his business, that Callan property on the corner of
What was the business again?
Callan. He does all those windows and.
Oh, that one. Yeah, I think we looked at that at the time
Made
and,
that
and,
delineation.
and said it was because it was similar to something in the code. It happens all the time because you can't list 1,000 different businesses in your code.
Thoughts on that one?
I'm a planning commission guy. To me, that's, I think it's pretty straightforward and simple. Why bother the board with it?
Right.
And you're in need of a tattoo.
And a haircut.
Yeah. Well, it's not too bad yet.
So plan commission for now, see what the
Yeah,
board
see what
says?
the board says.
Okay,
right. They
sounds
have
good.
final say so.
Let's see, what else should we talk about? I won't talk about home occupations. I think that was pretty straightforward. That was pretty clear that I made the changes per last meeting. Let's talk about just real quickly the removal of the residence and leaving the accessory building. That's on page 35 if you have your code in front of you. Essentially, I set 2 processes up now into that section. That's under the site regulations section that requires the principal building to be built before the accessory building is. And again, there was the exception in there to allow the second home to be built if letter credit's posted. And so I've just simply added in there that the house can be raised, the accessory building can be left, which again would normally would violate that requirement of the principal building to exist on the parcel. The same thing here, as long as the letter of credit's posted, the engineer would basically determine the amount for 115%. The village attorney would take a look at it, the village engineer would write it up. If you recall, this was what started the discussion about removing the board from certain processes. So again, the board has nothing to do with this. This is a staff-only review. Basically, if you can post that letter of credit and the village attorney signs off on it and the engineer signs off on the amount, and you can meet all the ordinances in terms of setbacks and offsets, et cetera, it's a done deal. The Plan Commission and board doesn't have to see it. So I think that's what we talked about last time. Because what are the intangibles here? Either you can meet the requirement or you can't.
Turn the crank process,
Right.
the opportunity to, if somebody really wants to turn their home property into a lot, that's their choice.
Right. Right.
Well, this isn't turning it into a lot.
If they tear the house down,
This is for people who have an accessory building that they want to keep and a house they want to tear down and rebuild.
right.
But if they stop in the middle of the process and they just have an accessory building, isn't the money to?
Yes, we're going to enforce that letter of credit. We're going to use that to make them tear the accessory building down. So
Tear
then,
the accessory building, then it's a lot.
if they don't build the house, and I think I have some timelines in here. 2 years. They have 2 years, right? Which is more than enough time, I think, to.
They could ask for more time.
They could come back and ask for more time, right?
Might not be able to get an oven in that time.
Right? Yeah. It's a refrigerator. Are you looking for an oven?
Yes.
Yeah, we had friends that ordered a refrigerator, and it was like, I don't know, a year before they got it.
Well, this is actually pretty consistent with how we've been doing it anyhow. You know, that you can't have an accessory building without a primary structure.
Right.
And just the recent incidents were down the street here where the guy wants to tear the house down and rebuild is kind of what brought this question.
That's exactly
back up
what
again, I
brought
think.
this up, yeah.
Now, I don't know what his intent is down there. If he's gonna build on the same footprint, is it really tearing the house down? Or is it just,
It's not quite the same footprint. It's in the general area. It's not going to be the same footprint. It'll just be close by. And he wasn't able to leave the old house up and build a new one because we already had a provision for that.
right?
It was going to overlap a little bit, so
Yeah.
it wasn't going to be quite possible, but not exactly the same. So now these make sense. I mean, both these instances make sense in a realistic standpoint. Either have two houses for a period of time or have no house for a period of time when an accessory building
Right.
exists.
And I'm not sure well, I know the board shouldn't be involved, but the plan commission shouldn't be involved.
What's the review?
What's the review?
Because I can
He
tell
needs it.
them if the zoning is in
He meets
place
the
and
zoning, he meets the setbacks.
the letter of credit's approved by the attorney.
Letter of credit's approved or the cash bond, and there's a time limit on it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not forever,
Right, 2 years.
2 years. That's a reasonable time limit.
Turning the crank, it's just following the process.
Right. And people are gonna, in the future, gonna want to raise houses.
I did notice though that we don't explicitly say that.
What's happened around all the lakes in the area?
Right, well, yeah.
You know, they tear them down.
Well, if you're around a lake, it's almost a grand. Yeah, it's gonna happen.
I noticed that,
Every generation.
Mara, you brought the point up about they can come and ask for an extension. It doesn't actually say that, so I'm thinking we probably should add something that they could come and ask an extension, and then if they do that,
Then I think the plan commission should decide.
then it's the plan commission that decides?
Right. I would think so. Because otherwise, what do we do with staff that, oh, yeah, you can have another 6 months, another 6 months, right?
It's the fourth extension.
So he's gonna have to come in and say why. Why is the extent, and maybe he comes in and says, well, there's no materials, and blah, blah, blah. And the supply chain's busted again, right? And
Right.
so that's the reason for the extension and the plank.
More expensive than buying.
Yeah.
It may not be as.
Right now it is, yeah.
All right, we'll move on from that one.
Good, everybody on that.
The only other thing that I had to talk about besides the minor edits that were made, I mean, one of the minor edits was making single family and one family consistent throughout the document. I've changed that to one family. That seems to be the definition that we have in the beginning, so I was consistent with that. There weren't actually that many
I was
changes.
wondering why you changed that, because I looked at, isn't that the same thing?
It is. Carl mentioned it last time, and he's right. We should be, because the definition says one family, so we should be consistent with one family. All right, let's go to signage, which is,
There we
Better
go.
mean the same thing.
signage is page 49.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, we've beat signage up,
Yeah, well, that
Quite a
was one
bit.
of our charges, to fix the signage, you
right.
know?
What page again, John?
Nine?
Yeah, 49 it
49, I
starts.
guess it is.
And again, I changed signage from board to plan commission. So again, the question was, what do we do about off-premise signage like the sponsorship signage on village property? And so what I did when I looked at that one is that I started with so if actually on page 51, number 7. So it says, and this is the section of prohibited signs, right? And so number 7 is all off-premise signage is prohibited. And I've added, except within the P1 public and institutional district or otherwise specified per 300-13G or 313L. 313G and L are signs not requiring a permit at all, okay? And then the other one is, what is L? I forget what L is. Temporary signs. So those can be approved to be off premise as well. And so then if you go, so just bear with me, then if you go back up to the, up to page 50, where it talks about the public and institutional district, so now we allow off-premise signs in the P1 public and institutional district. And then I also added a sentence, the last sentence says signage for outdoor public recreational facilities in the P1 district is exempt from size limitations, because I had no idea how to even begin to think about signage and an area. And yeah, they still got to be approved, right? The sponsorship has to be approved. The plan commission is going to approve signage too here, right? So any of that signage, that sponsorship signage is still going to get approved by the plan commission, but there's no size limitation, for instance. Because,
We could have a size limitation.
Give me
They
an-
just hang them, banners on the fences.
okay, well, what, give me an
Is there a
idea.
standard size there? Yeah. 4x4 or 4x5?
Okay, well, I didn't know that. So if we can, I felt a little queasy about leaving it wide open. So if you think we can pin down a size, not total size, not total signage, but individual sign.
Right, right.
Um,
You go out and measure one, actually, if you wanted to. Right. Right, there should be some. Now, what else is in public and institutional district P1, Sean?
School, the school is. So. But that wouldn't be outdoor public recreational, right? That is a specific thing, right?
Oh, okay, it's not just P1,
No, that's,
it's outdoor recreational within P1.
so off-premise signage could be approved in P1, all right? So we've made that clear in this section.
Okay,
But then,
could be approved.
yes, but then the signage for public outdoor recreational is exempt from size limitations. We just need to
Right.
come up with something there.
But it still needs to be approved, so the board could approve the outfield signs.
When you say the board
schools-
approves those, how does the board approve? Previously, the board approved signage. We've changed it to the plan commission of the code, but what tell me about the process you're referring to.
Under the old rules.
Right, if a club comes and does it as a sponsorship, the board gets a certain cut of those, but all
Yeah,
those.
they approve the sponsorship deal, not the
No,
signs.
no, the board approves the signs. Before they can be put up, the group brings the signs to the board. to
Under
make
what
su-
ordinance does that get approved?
It's under like the recreational, it's not under zoning, it's under like a local ordinance.
Okay, and it says the sponsorship signage gets approved by the board.
Right.
So we probably have to reference that section here.
Or else have those
And the
companies come to
sponsorship
both.
Agreement probably says that all the signs have to be approved by the board.
Right.
Within the agreement as well.
Right.
Well, we could eliminate the plan commission from this. We could simply just carve something out here that says that signage that specific type of signage gets referred to the board.
Right. And it doesn't matter if it's Vernon property, school district property, I don't know what else is P1.
Well-
A church.
Well, I was thinking of only pulling out exempting sponsorship signage. It doesn't say that now, but if we're going to carve that out and move
Okay,
it to the
just carve
board.
a very narrow little.
Yes. Whatever it says in that section of the ordinance that I haven't seen yet, just refer to that section and say that specific signage is in that section, that particular signage gets approved by the board is exempt from this section.
Oh, and just
Just exempt it from this section altogether.
cross-reference it and be done.
Yeah.
Exempt it and by cross-reference
Right.
and be done.
Isn't the biggest P1 category we have Norris Farm?
Yeah, that's what I'm,
That's
what I'm
700
concerned-
acres.
That's what I'm concerned about, but what you're talking about is better. But,
Yeah, because then I
concerned
could take
about-
this out altogether.
yeah, I'm concerned about the school district or Norris becoming a walking billboard,
Right.
off-premise sign.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we still would allow off-premise,
Yeah.
we'd still allow off-premise signs unless you want to just say specifically, also make that very narrow about off-premise signs only for those sponsorship signs. Or the temporary signs that we already allow.
Temporary signs we already allow.
Yeah.
To take care of, future home of, financing by, right? And for sale, realtor for sale signs.
Right.
You don't want it to look like NASCAR.
Right.
So what I'm hearing is
Exactly.
exempt the sponsorship signs, refer it to the village board for that process, and then mention specifically off-premise signs are allowed, but only those sponsorship signs in the P1 district.
Right. And Karen, does the board gets to approve the location of those signs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes they defer it to the DPW director as it relates
'Cause
to,
I noticed signs hanging on, you can see them from center. I don't know that who approved that, but,
the ones at the soccer field here.
yeah.
I think that was deferred to the recreation director and the DPW director.
Okay.
Those catch my eye all the time.
That's,
That's such a
I've
Yeah.
I've heard complaints.
the sponsorship signs is such a small little thing that I think it makes sense just to pull it out if it's a board issue that they're involved from the bigger picture of it as well. Just pull it out, exempt it, and just let them have it in a different section.
And you could just say no,
Yeah, and then the board can say yes or no on that.
or put them back further, or,
Right.
Right. But yeah, they ought to be able to determine, well, somebody needs to, at least someone, I'm open to suggestions, but somebody needs just to look at them to make sure that
Right. And if
they're
right,
decent signs. We're hanging them on children's fields, where children play.
right, they can't be junk, garbage. Yeah.
Right. And they have to be on nice material and all that.
Right.
They always are on these sponsorship.
So does that make sense? Carving them out.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we.
I didn't know
should
about that
do
section.
Whatever we're
Otherwise,
doing, make sure that it's
it's legal. Right.
right?
yeah,
We're not violating our ordinances.
right, because that's not a normal thing.
No, and I didn't even think to look somewhere else for that because it's
Right.
not. It's
Yeah.
unusual.
Right, it's out of place, if you will. But if you cross-reference it, then it's in, actually,
Then they work
it
together.
becomes in
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
It
Right.
locks it in place.
Yeah, essentially, it's the sign ordinance saying, here's how you deal with those signs. You refer to this other section of the code.
Right.
All right, the other thing I changed of substance here then is once I got thinking about recreational signs and those types of things, I did add a section here that signs that don't require permits are signs associated with outdoor public or private rec uses limited to 2 square feet in area. I was thinking of golf courses, nature trails, just a 2 square foot sign that doesn't need any approvals that they can put up something, yeah. A tee box, a hole, an arrow, something that doesn't require approvals for outdoor recreational, public or private.
Makes sense.
Yeah, you don't want them coming because they're changing the whole sign, right? And they weren't coming to us anyways, but now it's legal, right?
Unless you want to make sure that they're not visible from a roadway so people don't get confused.
It's tiny.
Well, that's
you know.
tiny. If it's 2 square feet, yeah,
Right.
it's small.
So that's it for sign. Oh, we changed political signs. Remember there was some question about, hey, can we enforce time limits on political signs? Did you guys all get a copy of Attorney Macy's correspondence on that? Nobody had a chance to look at it or not, but it was a letter and then it was a bunch of, it was a few pages of some background material.
Yeah. Oh, and I didn't answer you probably.
Oh, maybe you didn't. Well, here's the,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess you did. May 11th, 1 o'clock. Hey, what's going on? Probably.
the bottom line is that the state statutes do allow for limitation on timeframes, and they target it to the campaign election period or whatever. And so that's defined in the state statutes. So to make it simple, what I've done is I just and there's a distinction between 11 square feet or less or other signs. And so the code now reads, this is number 18 on page 54, political signs shall be limited to 11 square feet, which the state statutes say. Political signs shall be limited to 11 square feet, are allowed only for the period described in the statutes, right? So we're not making up anything, we're just using their definition, and shall comply with section 300-13F of this ordinance, and that is prohibited signs. So you still have to comply with prohibited signs unless otherwise exempted by the state statutes. So there are some exemptions in there. So you can even go above 11 square feet according to the state statutes if it's affixed to something permanent, like it's on the side of a barn or it's on some permanent structure. The 11 square feet no longer applies. All right. So, or they, banner signs and that kind of thing. We prohibit banner signs and those kinds of things. But if it's allowed by the state statutes, then it would be exempted by the state statute. So trying to keep this very simple. In the event that the statutes would prohibit or would permit a sign that's larger than the size limitations, again, if it's affixed, in the subsection, such sign, regardless of sign content, is allowed only for the period described under the state statute. So we are just deferring to the state statutes on this one, and I think that's all we can do.
That's what we have to do.
Right.
We try to go above state statutes. I don't know.
Right. And we don't want to get too cute with this and try to word it any differently. I don't think. We just want to say, hey, 11 square feet's the max, unless the statutes allow something different. The signs listed in section L are prohibited unless the statutes say something different.
Mm-hmm. Right, we certainly shouldn't try to restrict them more than we do a regular ones.
Right,
'Cause
right,
that for sure will fail if somebody challenges it.
right. So that's it for that one. Any questions on that? Anything else to discuss before we talk about the next steps?
The ordinance on the sponsorship and donations is 239-12.
Say that again, 239?
239-12.
Thank you.
How about the matrix?
Yeah, let's what do you got on the matrix? I know you mentioned the uses determined by the board will now be changed to plan commission.
Right, that's the very last page.
What else do you got?
Yeah, the only questions I had is some of the either conditional uses or permitted accessory uses. I had a couple of, and one was on contractor yards, but how they, on the matrix as really, I was focused on the residential, so R1, R2, R3, but there's also RRD5, A2 rural home district, A3 suburban estate district, and some of the, particular in A2, A3, and RRD5, some of the either, that one I said is okay, feedlot operations, this is on page 1, feedlot operation, fur farms, pig farms, egg production facilities, why are they labeled as conditional use in rural home districts and suburban estate districts, for example? I thought that was a little bit too far of a conditional use extension.
What do the conditions say for that one specifically? I don't know off the top of my head.
322B7,
The only thing I can think of is that they're still A districts, right? They have an A in front of them.
right, but.
And that if they have enough acreage and they can meet all the conditions in the conditional use section, that they're okay to do those particular things. And we haven't looked at this. I've never looked at this issue in Vernon before. It's never come up. I haven't added that use. It's just been there since I've been in
Yeah, it
the
probably
village,
has,
so.
but our little education webinar, they said, look at the matrix and study the matrix.
322B7, 322B7.
So it's like, okay, I think we've got to protect our subdivisions, and those categories, maybe they're not subdivisions, RRD5 could be though.
RRD5 could be a subdivision.
So maybe, the A2,
But it could
A3,
be-
maybe it's okay, but the RRD5 it's not.
But the remainder of the land, if RRD5 carves off a bunch of lots and the rest of the land is preserved for farming, could still be zoned RRD5.
But I wouldn't want a feedlot there.
But if they can meet all the conditions, so what do the conditions say?
Well.
And I don't know what they say either because I'm still trying to find it. Okay, here it is. It's on page 92. So
Oh, you're there. I was on 84.
So the conditions are this: no operation, farm, or facility should be permitted on less than 35 acres of tillable land, nor closer than 1,000 feet from any land presently zoned for a residential district. No accessory residential shall be permitted closer than 100 feet to an operation, farm, or facility. No part of the operation, farm, or facility should be closer than 300 feet from the center line of any public road or 200 feet from lot lines, et cetera, et cetera. So well, 35 acres is like the standard, exclusive ag district in the state, right? 35 is like what you need for exclusive ag according to the, the state. So that's kind of what it's thinking. You got the 35 acres, whether you're zone A1 or A2 or A3 or whatever it is, because you have to meet these pretty stringent, you need 1,000 feet from other residential land. I don't know. This is the first time I've thought about this, so I don't have all the answers here.
Well, I'm raising it to think about it. I mean,
Right, but for this time around, or what? Because
well, this can be changed after the public hearing too. I'm just saying
no,
these could be.
what I'm saying is we could go through each of these uses, and maybe we should, but our task is part of this go around to the zoning ordinance edits. I don't know if we're going to be able to accomplish this, because this could take months more.
Yeah, I just flagged that one, for example, Sean, and the board, plan commission. Contractor's yard on page 4 extends in the rural home A2, A3, and RRD5. Again, maybe the A2, A3 is okay, but the RRD.
RD5 doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I mean, if you
I mean, it just was, you look at the matrix and why is that even a possibility in conditional use when you're talking about
I think
RRD5?
RRD5 would be a simple strike right now without too much more conversation.
Yeah,
right?
maybe
I think
that's it.
that's all maybe for now
that's
to
it. Right?
I agree. Like that, I'm not sure how it got in there as RD5. I only mention it because, I could see the preserved area, but again, it almost contradicts with the definition because it says it has to be 1,000 feet away from any land zoned residential. What already is zoned residential as our RD5.
Right. And the horticultural services, it's permitted accessory use. Again, A2, A3 may be okay, RD5, well, wait a minute, you're talking about retail sale of nursery, landscape, other agricultural crops, related commodities.
I'd be fine striking that from that too.
That I think the extension there was a little bit too much into RD5. And then the contractor's yards.
Where's contractors?
Contractors, page 4. If I'd be open to striking it out of A2 and A3 too, but for sure, to me, anyway, our RD5. And then the only other thing that I kind of flagged when I went through here, the bed and breakfast provisions extending all the way into the R1, R2, and R3. Do you want a bed and breakfast on a 1 acre, on a 1 acre lot? The big lot, sure.
Yeah,
I see that, and it's like, well, we're getting into Airbnbs and all kinds of
well,
stuff.
those are already allowed regardless. The state already protects those.
Right. Unfortunately.
I mean, you can have an ordinance that requires that it appear exactly like a single family home, et cetera, and limit it to a certain number of days a year, but.
Yeah, I just thought the conditional use there.
So what was the last one? I'm sorry, the last one you mentioned
It would
was,
be bed and breakfast extending to all residential.
what page is that on?
This is page 2. Oh, yeah, and then I had a technical question on page 2.
Bed and breakfast, yeah, so you're saying the larger lots, the ag lots, bed and breakfast makes sense, but R1, R2, R3,
Yeah, aren't those
Maybe
1 acre,
not.
2 acre lots?
yeah, those are even less.
Or even less.
R2 is 30,000 square feet,
Yeah.
R3 is 20,000 square feet, so
Yeah, it's even smaller.
we don't really have R3, but it's there if we, need it for whatever.
Well, we might.
Well, it might even be less. Yeah, we're gonna have
Maybe less than that.
Yeah. All right. Does anyone feel strongly about getting rid of B and B in R1, R2, R3?
The little ones, little lots.
I'm not certain that the size of the lot has much to do with it, to be honest with you. But
It's a conditional use either way, so there's a number
Yeah.
of conditions that have to be met.
Right. Including the person has to live there.
Right. The person has to live there. Yes.
It's just the smaller lots, meaning
So Jim,
the neighbors are closer together.
yeah. So Jim, you're kind of pointing to the why not allow it in R2, R3?
right, it's a house.
It's a house. Yeah.
We're not saying that the house has to be so gigantic that it wouldn't fit on those smaller lots.
All you need is one bedroom, essentially, an extra bedroom that you rent out,
Right, right,
if you can meet all the conditions in our ordinance. Yeah.
sure. Mm-hmm.
So, from my standpoint, I don't see why we would overly restrict where you could put a B and B.
Any thoughts, Mario?
I mean, it's a business.
It's a business,
Yeah,
yeah.
because
Put it in a residential area.
Right, that's why it's a conditional
The
use.
neighbors are closer in
But it's-
smaller lots.
Right, but it's still gonna look like a house.
That's true.
So it's gonna fit
Also,
in.
as you know, vacation rentals, we can't do too much about those either, and those can happen without the owner being there.
Yeah.
So, this is probably better than that because the owner's there.
Right,
And you can't eliminate those from R1, R2, R3.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So with that in mind then, knowing that those already can happen, does the B and B really bother you? that
Yeah,
much?
I raise it because I was looking at the residentials and it's just like, well.
No, it's a good point, but
We ought to do it thinking about it as opposed to, it's always been in there.
mhm.
I just question why on smaller lots that it even needs to be in there.
Did we bring you around though? Do you thinking
Not
maybe?
really.
No?
No.
in there.
I mean, I'd ban it everywhere, but on larger lots, I can see it.
So we need a consensus though.
Presumably, larger lots, more opportunity, smaller lot, less people coming in.
Well, that's arguing it's self-regulated because of that. like, I don't buy into self-regulation because people don't do, they do what they feel that best for them and not their neighbors, so,
Yeah.
that's.
I don't, I kind of am coming down on Jim's side, and especially because vacation rentals are already long-term, or weekly rentals, short-term rentals are already allowed.
Right.
A bed and breakfast is a better situation than that
Right.
because the owner is on site.
Then I had, Mario, all right, well.
Well, did we
I
decide on
can't
that?
run everything.
I have nothing more on that one.
So what's the verdict?
Well, Jim and
I
I
would
were
say
one to
leave it
one.
in.
I don't get to make
Jim
the
and I were one
decisions.
to one. Yeah, so Mario, what's your feeling?
Mark it what I feel. I'm leaving it then.
I'm inclined to not change it.
Okay.
Leave it as is. Okay, we'll move on.
Technical question, plan unit development, Sean, there's a bunch of conditional use, but including in R1, R2, and R3, but not RRD 5.
Yes,
Is
RRD
that
5.
a specific why you did that?
No.
Why it's like that, I mean?
Yes, RRD 5 has a provision in that it already works like a PUD,
Oh,
where you have smaller lots and as small as 1 acre in size and preserving the rest. And so you don't get any bonuses if you're already zoned RRD 5 like the PUD allows.
Okay, that's what I figured. I knew there was probably a technical reason, it's like.
Right, that's
not
the
a
reason.
typo that it just didn't get,
There's already special rules for that
Okay.
district.
that was a question. Not suggesting we change anything there. I think that's it, and I bet I know the answer to this technical question too. The community living arrangements, we have to allow it.
Yes, state requires that.
Yeah, well, again, I'd only circle it for the R1, R2, and R3, size lots. I
That-
mean, Is the only reason I'd want to change that one to those smaller ones, that's all.
Hey.
Yeah, we're in the middle of a meeting here, sir. I recognize you, though.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And you are, the property that I recall you're interested in is not on the agenda. But I will be
Oh, it's
giving,
not? Okay.
I will be giving a report. If you're here to listen to the report, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're welcome to stay. I'm not kicking you out.
Okay.
You walked in like you were gonna say something.
No, no, I just got done with the baseball game, so I just wanted to come back to you guys are meeting tonight.
Okay.
So if you have other questions or edits or whatever it is after tonight's meeting, obviously send them my way as soon as possible and I'll
I got some small stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's punctuation.
Do you just want to send it to me?
I really want to bring it up.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Just send it. That's what I do. Just send them in.
So yeah, that works great. I mean, if you just mark something up or send me a quick email or note.
Send it to Karen. Karen sends it around.
Yeah.
You sent my little.
Yeah, bring it to me, I'll scan it and send it off to everybody. Sound good?
Yepper. Okay, so
So the next steps, Carl, you asked me, I think the other day to kind of talk about how this works and
where it goes and
where it goes. Yeah. So changes to the zoning ordinance are the same exact thing as changes to the zoning map in terms of the statutes, in terms of our ordinance. Page 150 outlines the process. And so what it says here is that such proposal, either to change the map or to change the regulations in the ordinance, may be initiated by the board on its own motion, by recommendation of the plan commission, or by petition of one or more property owners. And so, the board sort of already gave the go-ahead on this to move this forward, and that's why we're doing this. So then basically at the bottom of page 151, or near the bottom, number 4 says, hearing upon the recommendation of the village plan commission and proper notice per section 346B, the village board shall hold a public hearing thereon. So the village board holds the public hearing, right? It can be joint if you want the plan commission and board to be there together.
right. The plan commission recommends to the board that they hold a public hearing.
Correct.
Okay.
And the village board shall hold a public hearing thereon.
Right.
And then the board makes a decision after receipt of a recommendation from the plan commission.
within an appropriate time frame, which is what, undefined.
Right, right. The statutes don't talk about that
Yeah.
either.
Probably has to be, they'll read reasonable,
So,
which means not 3 years from now.
right. If somebody petitions you to change their zoning, you can't hold it forever, right?
Right, it'll have to be,
Where certified survey maps and plats have time limits on them.
right.
And
Hard
rezoning
time-
doesn't
hard
really have a
time.
limit, just reasonable, right? So I think what we talked about was that the next step is to before the public hearing is held, to send it to Attorney Macy for legal review, and then also send it to the board as a courtesy and says, here's where we are at this point, right?
Right, I guess that's right.
I guess the question is, what comes first? Do you want Macy to look at it? And he's very detail oriented, so he'll probably have a fair amount of comments and markups as part of this. It could even affect substance, and if it's substantive and policy oriented, it may even have to come back to the Plan Commission.
Right, he may say, a comment may say this is policy and.
It's policy. There's a problem here, and it's policy oriented. You need to figure out what you want to do.
He could have a comment like that.
Yeah.
Well, we need to take something to me, if we're gonna recommend to the board to, schedule and hold a public hearing, it should be pretty much what the Plan Commission and the board wanna adopt
Well, you have to give it to the board first,
first, I think.
so that and ahead of time, as far as I'm concerned, because there's a lot of pages in this
Yeah.
Yeah.
that we're changing, and for them to approve it, they kind of need to read it.
So do you want to send it simultaneously to the board and Attorney Macy to say, here's what we have?
Or do we just send it to the board and say, should we, with
Legal review's the next step.
Have the board order up legal review. It's ready for legal
Yes,
review.
yes.
As opposed to the board coming back and saying, hey, we don't like this as a policy matter, this whole signage thing, rewrite it, or with direction. I don't wanna hear from the board, even though I'm the president of the board, to send it back to the Plan Commission with no direction, but just to send it back because they didn't like it.
Yeah, I like that.
They gotta send it back with specific direction. Otherwise, it's like, why? What do you?
I like that approach, having the board order the legal review versus the Plan Commission, because it's spending money.
Spending money and it's not a 3-hour job. I mean, it's gonna be,
It's going to take them a bit, yeah.
it's gonna take them a bit. There's Jim, to your point, well, we might as well, instead of guessing, it's 55 pages, 154 pages. Plus the matrix, which
Right.
from our training is the more important thing. Or just as important, right?
Yeah.
So there's 7 pages there. So we had 161 pages of information. Not every page is changed. I mean, I think we stayed pretty close to what we were requested to do. I mean, we went a little bit further.
Yeah, we went a little outside the scope, but not too far outside.
Right. And only where it kind of made sense, too.
Right. Do you, how soon can you give me your final edits? Because then I can wrap this up and we can get it to the board for the next meeting and pass it along to them.
Yeah, we could even give it to the board ahead of a recommendation by the plan. I mean, if we want.
I would say the Plan Commission makes the recommendation at the public hearing date, because this basically says,
Oh, okay.
first is the public hearing, and then decision, board shall make a decision with an appropriate time after you receive the Plan Commission recommendation, so. I don't know, any thoughts?
Pardon me?
Where's Dan at looking at it? Is he?
He said he was done. You talked to him?
Right, he had gone through it pretty thoroughly.
Are you sending it to legal before the public hearing?
Yes.
Well, that'd be the other question. Do we wait for the public hearing? And then send it to legal?
Oh, God, I think that's a mistake. Don't you?
Which is a mistake?
Not sending it to legal before you go to public.
I think you're gonna have to send
I
it.
think we have to, yeah.
Yeah. Because if it makes it through public hearing without substantive changes, it can be adopted.
Or John may change a bunch of stuff and it has to come back to the plan
Then it'd be
commission.
a
and-
disaster. We'd have to have another public hearing.
Right, I think it's gotta have legal review.
I mean, put on the next agenda, you know, the plan commission's recommendation to the village board to send it for legal, not knowing for sure what you want to do. I would think you'd want legal review.
Yeah. I'd like to have the board have an opportunity to review it in case they wanted to flag something before it went to legal,
That's what I was thinking.
you know, right?
So it's just a matter of everybody getting their comments.
Yeah,
Comments in and-
so when do I need to get it to you by to get it to the board?
Did you want it on this agenda or the next agenda?
We could put it on the next agenda, but that doesn't mean they can't have an advanced draft as quickly.
Right, we
as
could send
put
it tomorrow. if we
Yeah,
had
I
it.
mean, if we had all the comments in tomorrow, we could send it tomorrow, but it's not gonna happen tomorrow,
Right,
but, you know, next week or,
And just so the board knows, the plan commission, the board already has this draft up in a separate packet on their board packets, just so that if they wanted
so
to
they
follow
could be
along.
following along all the time.
And
They're
you
getting
did-
each draft.
And you did ask them to do that at the last board meeting, for them to either watch the meeting or,
Okay, so we'll get the draft wrapped up in the next week. Get it to Karen. It'll be on not this next week's board meeting, but probably the one after that.
Right, that would be the first week in June. The June 2nd, then the plan commission meets then June 8th, but.
So then the public hearing, the board holds the public hearing.
Yeah, I think that's what we decided, right?
Right.
I mean, that's the way it's written.
Though it can be a joint meeting.
Well, sure,
It should be a joint, the plan
It should
commission
be a
should be
joint-
there.
should be there, yes. Should be a joint meeting anyway. But it's technically the board's public hearing, but
Right, so let's work. Attorney Macy is probably he's a busy guy, right? It's gonna take him probably at least a couple weeks to get through and fit it into his schedule. So sounds like we probably wouldn't have the public hearing until maybe, I don't know, I mean,
July, probably,
maybe,
right?
yeah. And at some point, the plan commission has to make a recommendation on the draft, whether that happens at the June meeting or it happens at the public hearing, right after if you close the public hearing, plan commission makes a recommendation to the board approves.
Depends on what happens at the public hearing.
You also could make a
There's a bunch
recommend,
of good ideas, let's say, then maybe we'll have to work through them
right,
and
could be,
recommend it in a
yeah,
month.
yeah,
right?
okay. Sounds like we got some time
Right.
to work it out. Well, we can shoot for July hearing, yeah.
So what do we need to do tonight, plan commission? Final comments are in, you're gonna produce a draft.
Make a recommendation
I
to,
could put it on the board, or do we want to make a motion to recommend it to the board with
for
change?
legal review.
For legal review, you know, with the changes we discussed tonight. or
Tonight, yeah.
At today's meeting or something
Right.
like that.
Yeah, nothing I have yet is gonna be
Substantive.
Substantive.
substantive for a legal review.
Right.
Yes, and then when the board meets, we'll,
if we can send it to the rest of the board, or at least the imperative that you put it out there, and we need them to read it, because they're gonna have to approve it. That doesn't have to be done by next week, probably couldn't be.
Couldn't be, because that, well, yeah. It would probably be unfair to ask.
But next week, we could look for the approval to send it to the
We-
attorney.
We could,
I mean,
we could, if people are following along and are comfortable with it, then,
which I'm not confident that that's happened, but
right, we could send it, put it on the board agenda. Probably should put it on the board agenda for at least, if there's no action, there's no action, but at least a discussion.
if they want to take action.
Yeah. I don't know if you can have a draft. of-
I'm almost done. It sounds like the edits are minor, so I can be done in probably an hour or two. I mean, if,
Right, so you could get it. Right,
so,
I think it's gonna take more than just putting it out there to get the rest of the board to read it thoroughly enough
Yeah.
to make a decision to
To make
send it
a-
to legal.
yeah.
could you promise to get your edits to me if you have any by the end of the week? by Friday? That way,
I was thinking Monday, but
okay. Well, let's say Monday.
Give you the weekend, right?
Let's say, okay, let's say we have them by Monday. I can make the edits probably Monday too. That's okay to get it to you for the board? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, because they're not gonna get that far into it yet, but,
Because if they've read what's already up there, they're well on their way.
oh, sure, yeah.
Right. Right, the big things, the signage has been rewritten and
Right.
the whole.
There's some things are minor and some things are more substantive. Okay, sounds like we have a plan then. So
Okay. And you're gonna make those couple little things on Exhibit A too, the changes?
that we just talked about? Yes. All right, that's it.
So do we need a motion by the Plan Commission to recommend to the board to review the proposed changes to Chapter 300 zoning for determination to, for legal review, for determination to ask for legal review or something.
Because that's the biggest thing, that the rest of the board is really gonna have issues on, is sending stuff to the attorney
Right.
because of the cost,
Because of the cost, and sure, they should weigh in on that.
right?
So that'll be my, yeah, Sean.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, they want to forego legal review, they can do that too, but not recommended, right?
Right. So that'll be, I'll make that motion.
I'll second
Did you
that.
get enough of it? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, that's good. Now my report, Sean, yeah, just hang on. Sean and I, first item on the report, and again, this is a report, and it's just not for discussion, but I wanted to report into the Plan Commission. Let me get my notes. My ever assembled file. Sean and I did meet with the Village of McWanago interim planner, as he likes to call himself, their president and their administrator. When was that? Tuesday, yeah, Tuesday. And I updated the board at our last board meeting, so I wanted to update the Plan Commission as well. This is the property, the Hine property that Newman has under contract. I'm not sure if he closed or not, or at least a portion of it. And what we refer to as in prior meetings, the National Avenue property, which is property that a member of the public is here to listen about too, which is to the northeast of that Hine property. And we've had some initial proposals, and at our last Plan Commission meeting, Representative Newman came in with yet a newer proposal, and with a suggestion that we should now need to really talk to the Village of McWanago, because it's really a joint project, and which is what I think our Plan Commission was saying all along. And so we did have that meeting. Out of that meeting, there's three big issues. To boil it down, there's hundreds of details, but there's three big issues. That is the roads, which we've talked about ad nauseum at the Plan Commission. The roads, whether the boundary between Vernon and McWanago can or should be adjusted. And the third one is whether Vernon should establish a special utility district for sewer and water, and the flip side of that is whether McWanago will extend sewer and water into the Village of Vernon. Those are the three issues that we discussed about. Village of McWanago was very adamant about having the traffic coming in off of Fox Trail, not cul-de-sac out, but to connect roads to their little stub road, Van Buren, which you've heard the Newman representatives are adamantly against, and then have access to National Avenue through that property to the northeast. And we did talk about that in the environmental corridor and the fact that it might require DNA fill. And that, to me, and Sean, I would say that's more of a developer issue. If the developer can't see to those roads, and the Village of McGuanago says, well, then you don't get your approval. If it doesn't go in the Village of McGuanago, it's not going in the Village of Vernon. You know, and I think our plan commission, when we discussed it, we, you know, I would say we're neutral on the Van Buren. We understand the two sides to it, you know. And eventually, if you're gonna go to that property to the northeast, the National Avenue property, yeah, you can't, you're gonna have to punch the road through eventually, it seems to me. You know, so that one we could, you know, see as a legitimate ask out of McGuanago. The boundary, so that was the road issue. The boundary, we did talk about adjusting the entire boundary, but we felt, or at least my view is, if we try to adjust the whole boundary, we'll either never get to the finish line or it'll be 2 or 3 years. However, if we talk about the boundary being adjusted, being confined to the property in question, and even up in land and development value, in other words, by lots, I would think both the Plan Commission on a CSM and also our board would take the view that so long as it's even in value, we don't want individual subdivision lots, half of which or part of which is McGuanago and part in Vernon. There ought to be a way to draw that border and adjust our boundary to prevent that from happening. And as long as it's even up, I think, you know, my view, we'd be crazy not to consider it. So you guys, right. The third is to me the bigger and more politically problematic issue, both on their side and our side, which is the extension of sewer, water, and the Vernon. They may not just want to do it. I think on the Vernon side, we may not want it, number one, but I think we, you know, the view was, I think the consensus view is we're going to consider it at least where it makes sense, provided that there's no taxpayer cost to other taxpayers. So, and I did talk to Attorney Macy, and he said there's a good example out there where the special utility district pays, I think is in Summit with the city of Oconomowoc, you know, pays for everything. So everything is on the ratepayers, nothing on the rest of the taxpayers. I think that's a fundamental non-starter if that's not true. Number two, I think it needs to be restricted to the property to try to do something more expansive. It's one of those things that the bigger the bite, the more likely you're not gonna get anything done.
Right.
You know, there shouldn't be any further expansion of it. That's easy to say. We could establish it like that, but that will be the answer. You constrain the utility district,
That's what I was
and that would by itself have no further expansion. You could make the utility district bigger than that property, and if that's the case, then you would say, well, you're expanding it already. But if you confine it, chances of getting it, you know, considered and possibly approved, I think, are a lot higher, I think. So that was the summation of our meeting, Sean. Isn't that kind of that's how I walked away from it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So that's the report. I don't, you know,
So their plan commission's meeting tonight.
yesterday, and I have not, yesterday, and I did not hear anything today about what and how much they talked about. I did talk to their administrator about what I just said. I don't know that it's any big secret. I talked to our board about what I just said, talked to their village president about what I just said, although I think our connection was not the greatest when I talked to him. So, yeah, it's the same report.
Yeah, their board hasn't met yet.
And their board hasn't met, be in 2 weeks, I think, there, so.
We'll know by then.
Right. But it's a big, you know, those are the big issues. You know, you talk to the developer and, you know, they'll say, well, we got to get them all resolved, otherwise it doesn't go forward. Well, you know, that's why I say they're big issues. And then you get into all the other issues like, well, are we putting in sidewalks? Are we putting in streetlights? Blah, blah, you know. On the Vernon side of the subdivision, how is all this going to work? But without the resolution of those three issues, you know, it's probably not going forward. So that's the report there. The checklist for development, the models developers agreement, I think are just there to as placeholders. Again, in my view anyway, that checklist for development and the developers agreement, how much of that is gonna be plan commission versus board or staff? I thought the best way to tackle those is concurrently with a big development, and we could do it concurrently and update the checklist, right, Sean? And models developer agreement, that's not really a planning document, but it would be scrubbed over on a big development like this, and then we'd have a good model going forward. And to tackle that project, in either of those projects, while we're doing the zoning code, it seemed to me, again, biting off too much, then we won't get anything accomplished. And the zoning code, we got direction to do it, or a request to do it, so. Now that we're done, now maybe we can start the next, we can start the next ones.
Checklist and
Yeah.
the developers. Again, I think you're right, the developers agreement is more the board, the plan commission, so they can take a peek at it and give their opinions on it. But
Right.
It's mostly about,
Yeah, if identifying the plan commission issues, or Sean, if you have specific issues. The best way to do that probably is to have a staff or a meeting where, Vince could come in and John Macy could come in, and the board and the plan commission come in and go through the existing one so that people understand it, and then identify places where things are not either working properly or
Need to be improved.
need to be improved, or it's back to what we just talked about today. There are certain things in that model development agreement where the board needs to approve, like the first lift of asphalt. Well, we don't know. I can tell you right now, we looked at Andy, and John Henneberry, our DPW director, and said, well, was it done? Was it done right? I mean, so whether that's a board decision or a staff level decision, it's those kinds of things that, when we get into that agreement.
Yeah.
So that's the report there. Letter D, status of staff research, and I know Karen's been working on this, so maybe she can update us on
Yeah, we're
CUPs.
still waiting for information to come through, or more information from the county. Some of these are so old that there is no conditional use that exists, or site plan of operation, but we're recording everything, and as soon as we have that worksheet, there's several of them are gonna have to come back, because there's conditional uses that are operating that have no approvals.
not, what do you mean?
They've never been approved by this, by any,
By county or us or anybody.
But how do we know that?
because I contacted the previous owner, and so I sold that a while ago, and the new owner called and said, I didn't know I was supposed to.
Interesting. So we'll be obviously at some point setting.
Yeah. Right. A lot of them are, grading, because we sent the letter to everyone, and the subsequent owner doesn't know anything about it, and then when you look it up, it was minor land grading, which required a conditional use. I mean, but I wanna
So
have
it's
those
not-
all, yeah,
So if they've already finished the
Right.
grading, but we don't require that anymore.
right,
The village, we don't require grading, the county required certain grading over a certain amount was a conditional use. Like it required a conditional use permit to grade over a certain amount. I don't even know why that,
oh, that was.
they do that, but it seems odd for conditional use permit, but they do
Especially if the grading is in connection with the
development.
development,
Right.
right?
So there's some old stuff, but yeah, that's no
Right.
longer the case.
Yeah, and those would be dropped after, but I'd like to have the full spreadsheet with all the
Sure.
information, and then, keep that for history, and then, get rid of the ones that are.
Get rid of the ones that aren't existing
Right.
anymore, and then we'll have dates on there for the ones that have to be,
Right.
when's the last time
Right.
we followed up on this one, or this one, this one.
Right. So we can start better practice, best practice or better practice,
Right.
keeping track of them all.
Clearly, we don't know what the heck's out there.
Right.
So that's it, Mr. President, there.
Okay.
And then if you could table the minutes, there are some changes I'd like to make, and if we could do it at the next meeting, Mr. President?
Okay, I'll make a motion to table those minutes until the
Second.
next plan commission. Is there any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
We're doing nothing to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Is there a second? I'll second. Why am I asking? I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
No, actually,